Hello, this is Aram Hamparian from the Armenian National Committee of America headquarters in Washington, D.C. I am seated today beneath a portrait of Vahan Kardashian, a great Armenian hero, but not simply an Armenian hero, an American pioneer of human rights advocacy, of support for the self-determination, the inalienable rights of people all over the world. He truly is a remarkable character in not simply our tradition, our Armenian tradition, but also in American history. So major salute to Vahan Kardashian. This particular portrait, which you see up here, was loaned to the Armenian National Committee of America by the Heidelberg Association up in Watertown, Massachusetts. It is an honor for us to work in his spiritual presence, because in many ways he was the father of the Armenian American lobby. He was in charge of the American Committee for the Independence of Armenia, a precursor of organizations that eventually became today the Armenian National Committee of America. So paying a tribute today to the great Vahan Kardashian, and I'll do that by talking about how we are continuing his legacy, how we are building upon his work. If there was in that era just a handful of people who are willing to step up and fight for the Armenian people, people looked and said, why, it's a one-man operation. It wasn't a one-man operation. We had many others, but he was out front. Today we can count upon not just 1 or 10 or 100 or even 1,000. We have tens of thousands of Armenians around the country who raise their voices, who stand up, who push back, who don't take no for an answer. We are today truly a community of Vahan Kardashians, and for that we can be very proud of ourselves, but also deeply grateful to all that Vahan did to make our work possible. So what I've done today is prepared a walkthrough of our current activities, our most recent advocacy. So, if you have a moment now, grab a cup of coffee, take a seat. This is going to be long form as opposed to short form. This will be a little bit of a deeper dive, where we'll go into some details of each of our legislative and advocacy initiatives. So if you prefer, shorter stuff, you want a quicker hit of your high tide intake, then maybe check us out on Instagram or on Twitter. We're going to go and do a walkthrough of where we are today on Capitol Hill and here in Washington, D.C. Let me start, as I should, with our legislative agenda, because ultimately that's where the action is in Washington, D.C. We work obviously with all branches of government, certainly the executive branch, legislative branch, on occasion with the judicial branch, but it's the legislative branch that is most responsive to our concerns, and where the key appropriations and policies that guide the executive branch are in many ways set, or at least guardrails put on the worst excesses of an administration, Democrat or Republican, that veers off course. So let me start with what we've done in the last couple of months. And we saw recently that the House considered the foreign aid bill, the fiscal year 2022 foreign aid bill, which will fund all our foreign aid programs for the coming year. We introduced a range of measures, saw some of them accepted, some of them rejected. One of them, very meaningful, reached the House floor, the Plone Amendment, which was adopted overwhelmingly without opposition by the full House as part of the foreign aid bill. Now you know that, of course, that we have a bicameral legislature, so both houses of Congress need to adopt this measure. The House has done so. We will work now, and we are working now on the Senate side to see that done, so that the bill that gets sent to the president and signed into law includes this provision. Now, let me tell you what that provision is. It was presented by Congressman Plone, the founding co-chair of the Armenian Caucus, a legislator from New Jersey, my home state. And Congressman Plone included a provision that said none of the funds under this bill may be used to fund international military education and training or foreign military financing for Azerbaijan. Those are two streams of assistance to the government in Baku. Very wealthy, very corrupt government, doesn't need $1 of U.S. assistance, but nonetheless, they've received this assistance, in the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars over the past several years. This particular amendment addressed two of those funding sources: FMF, as I mentioned, foreign military financing, and IMED, international military education and training. Those two streams are underneath the State Department. For reasons that surpass understanding, the State Department has jurisdiction over these two military assistance programs, and the amendment that was adopted would prohibit any more of that assistance. Now, the fact of the matter is that they're not very large streams of assistance. They're in the millions of dollars. And in fact, they've gone up and down over the years. It's unclear exactly what the level is now. But nonetheless, the message was sent, the prohibition was put in place. The Plone Amendment to the House Foreign Aid Bill prohibits U.S. FMF and IMET to Azerbaijan. Step one. Now, we now turn to the Senate, where we would like to see that language matched on the Senate side. And that's an undertaking that we are deeply, deeply engaged in, along with our regional offices in the East Coast and West Coast, our local chapters, more than 70 now, tens of thousands of activists around the country. It's an extremely high priority. That's the foreign aid bill piece of the puzzle. A more, let's say, diverse, robust, broader array of initiatives were introduced to a defense authorization bill. Now, I talk about these bills because sometimes you might think about legislation like in terms of the Armenian Genocide Resolution, which is a standalone resolution. It's just by itself, it's introduced, it goes through committee, it reaches the floor, it gets a vote, yes or no. Sometimes resolutions pass like that. And we invested literally decades to get the overwhelming yes vote on the House side, 405 to 11, and the 100 to 0 yes vote on the Senate side. But in the course of the legislative life of our nation, far more measures get adopted as part of very large bills. That's just the nature of the beast. That's how Washington operates. So the foreign aid bill includes a vast array of issues, literally from A to Z in terms of foreign policy. Every type of amendment is considered, some rejected, some accepted. Those that are accepted voted upon, and ours, the Plone Amendment, made it through. The same process took place with the National Defense Authorization Bill, which is a very large bill that I believe something like 800 amendments or 700 amendments were offered this year. And of those, a smaller number were ruled in order. Of those, a smaller number got a vote. And of those, a smaller number were passed. So let me review with you what was adopted on the House side of the Defense Authorization Bill. Mr. Plone, Congressman Plone, once again pressed very hard for an amendment on the military aid to Azerbaijan. We didn't get an amendment or a provision that prohibited the types of U.S. military assistance that are under the jurisdiction of the defense bill. Now, this gets complicated, I know, but please follow this because it's very important. Okay, so the FMF and IMET are under the jurisdiction of the State Department. The Defense Department manages something called Section 333 Capacity Building Assistance. That's the bulk of U.S. military aid to Azerbaijan over the last several years has gone under Section 333. And Section 333 aid to Azerbaijan has supporters because there are regional implications of this program, certainly dealing with Iran, possibly dealing with Russia. There's a lot of geopolitics involved, and there's a constituency, sort of a deeply embedded constituency that wants that to protect that aid to Azerbaijan. And for that reason, possibly, and maybe for others as well, we were not able to get an amendment considered that would outright prohibit the Section 333 aid. We would have liked that. Mr. Plone and others worked very hard for that. We certainly did as well. What was adopted was a good amendment. It was, they say, half a loaf, not a full loaf, right? It was that the U.S. Department of Defense must provide a report to Congress on the violations committed by recipients of Section 333 assistance. And certainly it's our understanding, and we believe this considerable evidence to back this up, that the Section 333 assistance that went to Azerbaijan for so-called coastal protection or for border guards were in fact deployed, were assets that were trained and then deployed against Artsakh and Armenia over the course of the past year. This report, we expect, if it's done honestly and in a forthright manner, will reveal that and hold Azerbaijan to account, frankly hold Turkey to account for serving as the arsenal of Azerbaijan's attack last fall. So that's the Plone Amendment to the defense bill. It's separate from the Plone Amendment to the foreign aid bill, both very significant measures and ones that we strongly supported. We were glad to see that both received bipartisan support. Certainly we are deeply grateful to the Foreign Aid Committee Chairwoman, Subcommittee Chairwoman, Barbara Lee, also the Rules Committee Chair, Congressman McGovern, and all those who worked with Mr. Plone to get those two amendments through. So one is a prohibition on two streams of aid. The second amendment is a report requirement on the third stream, the larger stream of aid, the 333 assistance. So that takes us through the assistance to Azerbaijan in the foreign aid bill and the defense bill. Let's move on. We also have an amendment that was offered by Mr. Cardenas, along with Mr. Schiff, Mr. Sherman, and others, that bundled together a number of our legislative priorities. At the very outset is its call upon Azerbaijan to release all illegally held, illegally abused, even murdered Armenian prisoners of war. We've been pushing that through HRS 240 separately on the legislative track through committee, but this was an opportunity for us to see that language adopted as an amendment and then passed by the full House. And we were very gratified to see the U.S. House overwhelmingly, without opposition, not a word from the Azadi co-chair, not a word from the co-chair of the Turkish caucus, the U.S. House called on Azerbaijan to release all illegally held Armenian prisoners of war. I'll talk more about this later because I think it's very, very important. And we're doing extensive work on Capitol Hill on this issue. So that was the first piece of the Cardenas Amendment. There were three others that are all significant. And these are, if you read this legislation, read these amendments, you'll see that they track very closely to the issues that we have addressed, that we've outlined in a very, very clear, concise, direct manner. So it addresses three high priorities in addition to the prisoners. Number one is the presence of U.S. parts in the Turkish drones that Azerbaijan used to kill so many Armenian civilians and soldiers during the Artsakh attack. Parts from Garmin and Microtech and other U.S. firms were found in those weapons. We have reviewed a report written by the Congressional Research Service, which delves into the legality of U.S. parts. They may be commercial parts, they may be off-the-shelf parts, but the weaponization of U.S. parts by a NATO ally, which then transfers those weapon systems to a third country, which uses them against civilians. It's our understanding, based on the reading of that document, that very likely U.S. export laws were broken, and we're working very hard on a number of fronts to advance this issue and make sure that congressional oversight and accountability is in order. Accountability must be the order of the day. We also, just as a sidebar, have worked with Mr. Cicilline and Mr. Bilrakis on a letter. 28 U.S. legislators signed a U.S. letter demanding an investigation, a briefing on the drone issue, on the presence of U.S. parts in Turkish drones. So that's the POWs, number one. Number two, the drone parts and the potential violation, the very likely violation of U.S. export law. Third is the mercenaries. Turkey clearly, openly, proudly recruited mercenaries from Syria and elsewhere, potentially from Pakistan as well, to fight against the Armenians of Artsakh, violating a number of laws, including an international convention against the use of foreign mercenaries. So that's the third item. And then the fourth item is prohibited munitions. So Azerbaijan's use of white phosphorus and cluster bombs and other weapon systems and munitions that are barred under international law. The Cardenas Amendment would call for release of prisoners and then those three reports. What's going on with the U.S. parts and Turkish drones? Why is Turkey not being held to account for recruiting mercenaries? And how can we hold Azerbaijan accountable for its use of white phosphorus, cluster bombs, and other illegal munitions during the war? That's the Cardenas Amendment. And once again, obviously, we saw that adopted on the House side. We worked very hard for the adoption of that on the House side. We were very gratified that it was not opposed. We did not see members of the Turkish caucus or Azadi caucus, try to defend the use of white phosphorus or Syrian mercenaries or to justify American parts in Turkish drones that killed innocent Armenians. No one has defended Azerbaijan's position of illegally holding and abusing, even killing Armenian prisoners of war. So when these things get drawn into the light of day, when members of Congress are forced to cast an up or down vote, they line up on the right side of the issue. When these issues, frankly, and I'll be very frank, are decided in the shadows, when they're decided behind closed doors of the Department of State or in the corridors of the Department of Defense, and they're conducted bilaterally in the shadows, in secret, they very rarely do the right thing. The right thing is almost never done in Washington in the shadows. But you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. You pull these guys into the sunshine, and sometimes they find their moral compass, and they do the right thing. And that's a good thing. And the ANCA we're doing good work. when we bring these issues out into the public. You know, there are folks who think that this stuff is best handled behind the scenes. Absolutely not. I can tell you, based on my years of experience, that every Armenian issue that we hold dear, whether it's justice for the genocide or freedom for Artsakh or security for Armenia, right? We advance these issues against intense opposition, very powerful opposition. The battle is highly asymmetrical. Behind the scenes, they hold all the cards. Out in the public, and under the light of day, we have great advantages. So that's how we address this asymmetry, and we address the power asymmetry through, I guess, a transparency push. Like, transparency is our friend, sunshine is our ally. So that takes us through the Plone Amendments, foreign aid and defense, and then second, the Cardenas Amendment. Next, and this is something we're deeply grateful for, and was pushed by Mr. Valadeo. He was helped by Congressman Sherman, who was really the father of the U.S. program of aid to Artsakh. Mr. Sherman, Mr. Valadeo, led the Valadeo Amendment, which calls for a report on U.S. assistance to Artsakh. Now, it's been several years now that the U.S. Department of State, under Trump and under Biden, they've been just not eager to see a dollar go to Artsakh for reasons that are beyond understanding, because there's great need in Artsakh. Our humanitarian aid program has for years been based on the premise of on a needs-based priority system. Where there is need, that's the place we help, not based on where the politics is right. That's where we help. If people are starving, if people are sick, if people are cold, we step up and do the right thing. Artsakh is hungry, they're cold, they are in need of shelter, they are in need of education and water, all these things, and yet the assistance to Artsakh has been meager. To be fair, and to put this in context, understand that our government, my family's been here now 100 plus years, right? Our taxes go to ship $120 million to Azerbaijan, a country run like an ATM by the oil-rich Aliyev family. The Aliyev family was reported recently to have purchased something like $740 million worth of property just in London. I don't know what they bought in Paris. I don't know what they bought in Berlin. I don't know what they bought in New York or LA. But I know they bought $740 million worth of property in London. And I'm sure they've spent a lot more, maybe considerably more, elsewhere. This is a country, this is a family, this is a regime that does not need U.S. assistance. And yet, our tax dollars that we either earn as Americans through our work or that we borrow against Armenia's future, that money's being shipped to the rich guy in Azerbaijan, in Baku, who lives in a palace, who's fabulously wealthy, fabulously, openly corrupt, fabulously wealthy. The other side of the equation. As Armenians, as Armenian Americans, our tax dollars are not reaching the people of Artsakh. The USAID recently wrote a report to Congresswoman Chu, God bless her for fighting so hard for these answers and getting these answers. She got a report from USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, that said essentially, the wording is kind of, it's kind of written in a very too clever fashion. The bottom line is something like $2.5 million has been provided for those people from Artsakh who've been displaced into Armenia. That's a subsection of people in need in Artsakh. Certainly the people in Artsakh itself are in great need. No news about that. But $2.5 million for Armenians who have been driven from Artsakh into Armenia. They put the number at 90,000. We put the number at 100,000. We'll split the difference. We'll say 95,000 Armenians. $2.5 million for all of them. There's another set of money which has gone to all the victims of the conflict, so-called Azerbaijan's aggression, and we're not sure. There's no accounting of that system. But what we can be certain of, at least based on this report, is that $2.5 million, essentially the price of a home in Potomac, Maryland, right? $2.5 million, sum total, for the 90,000 plus Armenians driven from their homes in Artsakh. No report of what's been given to the people in Artsakh, but if you've been pushed out, essentially budget dust for the Armenians, pennies for Artsakh, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions for the oil-rich Azerbaijani government. This is an utter disgrace. There's a polite way to say it, there's a diplomatic way to say it, there's a nuanced way to say it. I don't think the time for that has long passed. This is an utter disgrace. It is an embarrassment. We are outraged. Every American should be outraged. We are in front of members of Congress every single day asking, where is the aid to Armenia? We're holding the Biden administration to account. How is it that you can boast of all that you're doing around the world in so many places that need assistance? In Ethiopia, in Burma, in Gaza, in Yemen, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars being shared around the world, and that's a wonderful thing. I'm proud that my taxes can support that. I'm sure you are as well. But why is it that Artsakh has been starved of assistance? Why is it that we have to push and fight and to extract an answer from the administration, from USAID and the State Department? It takes months and months to get the answer, and then when you get the answer, the answer is $2.5 million. $2.5 million for 90,000 people pushed out of Artsakh, $120 million for an oil-rich government, which then used that assistance to butcher Armenians. So on the one side of the equation, our government is funding a military that ethnically cleansed the indigenous Armenian homeland of Artsakh. But we can find $120 million for that. That I guess we can always find. But for the Armenians themselves, who were the victims of that military that received U.S. funding, $2.5 million. And it's exactly for that reason, because of this outrage, this disgrace, that we're so happy that Mr. Valadeo, working with Mr. Sherman and others, put forward an amendment which is demanding a report on what's being done, what do you plan to get done, what is the next step. This exact question was asked by Senator Menendez of the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He asked Samantha Power, the head of USAID, very plainly, what are your plans on Artsakh? This number seems so low. It seems so low because it is so low. We never got an answer. There's no answer. The number that was in place 6 months ago, 12 months ago, that's the same number. There's been essentially no new aid. And as far as we can tell, no plan for new aid. And that's a policy that might make sense in Baku. Baku might want to starve the children of Artsakh, might want to deny them water, might want to deny them nourishment. That's an Azerbaijani policy. They're a murderous bunch out to eradicate the last Armenian in that part of the world. But is that an American policy? Is that where we've reached? This is an American policy. If you share this outrage, if you feel as strongly about this as I do, go to anca.org/aid, write a letter to your member of Congress, and then share that link with everybody you know. Armenian, non-Armenian, work colleague, classmate, neighbor, associate, boss, everybody, because it is insane that our government is so incredibly generous with an oil-rich billionaire who kills Armenians, but so incredibly stingy with the Armenian victims of that very army. The Armenian victims of that very army. A lot of these families don't have fathers because their fathers died protecting their homes. A lot of the fathers themselves don't have limbs. Maybe they were blinded. Maybe they were crippled. Maybe they're unable to care for their families. We need to step up. Our government, but for our government to do the right thing, we need to do the right thing. We need to do the meet the day. We must meet the day with our energy. We must bring our focus, our energy, our urgency to this effort. I stress this so very much because it is wrong on so many levels. It is wrong. When we talk about sending military aid to Azerbaijan, horrific, must stop. But in equal measure, we must see U.S. assistance to Artsakh. We must see, these are the two sides of the same coin. Will we turn a blind eye to Azerbaijan or will we hold them accountable? Will we abandon the people of Artsakh or will we step up and meet their pressing humanitarian needs? This is the choice before us. And for that reason, Valadeo amendment was a great amendment. We would like and are working to see that reflected on the Senate side of the Defense Authorization Bill. A last amendment that was put forward doesn't deal directly with Azerbaijan or Artsakh, but does deal with Turkey and some of the venomous hatred coming out of Turkey. One of the well springs of that hatred in Turkey is a group called the Grey Wolves. They're affiliated with a very right-wing political party, the Musava movement, MHP party in Turkey, which is an openly racist, unapologetically hateful, toxic organization that is literally built upon the premise of hating Christians, hating Kurds, hating Armenians, hating Greeks. Anybody who's not a Turk, they see no place for, not just in Turkey, but in the world. So Congresswoman Titus, who is of Greek heritage, introduced an amendment, and it was supported obviously by the Armenian National Committee, but also by our allies in the Greek community, and the Hindu community, and the Kurdish community, and among other groups that deal with human rights issues and religious freedom. Broad-based support for the Titus Amendment, which called upon the State Department to ban, or at least to investigate banning, the gray wolves. Now, France has done this. There's a precedent. A major NATO ally has already banned the gray wolves. We're calling upon the State Department to answer a couple of questions. First, do the gray wolves meet the conditions to be designated as a terrorist organization? And there's a U.S. law that sets forth every one of those conditions. So the first question of the State Department, based on this report, is do the gray wolves meet the conditions, the statutory conditions of to be designated a foreign terrorist organization? A. B, if you determine that they do not, which of the conditions do you believe they don't meet? That's a really good question, because they meet every single condition of being a terrorist organization. Like it's, I say prima facie, it is just on its face, they are the very poster child of a terrorist organization. They don't just commit acts of violence, they do so with loudly and proudly. This is their calling card. There was a video that was on our Instagram page recently of Turkish police recruits. The people in Turkey who are being trained supposedly to uphold the rule of law are making the gray wolves hand signal, which is banned in Austria, making the gray wolves hand signal and singing gray wolf songs. That's how deeply embedded, how deeply rooted this hatred is, and we need to step up against that, and the Titus Amendment does exactly that. So that takes us through two pieces of legislation, two larger measures, must-pass measures they're called, the Foreign Aid Bill and the prohibition on certain types of military assistance, and then the National Defense Authorization Act, which covers, as I said, aid to Azerbaijan, aid to Artsakh, Azerbaijani war crimes, and also the gray wolves. A busy legislative session in both regards, but we're not even halfway through the process. There are a range of other legislative priorities that we now need to move forward. I'll run through them rather quickly, and most of these will be addressed not on the House side, but on the Senate side. The House sort of time frame has largely closed on these measures, but now we're looking at the Senate, and then ultimately the conference process. That's how legislation largely moves in our system, is that you have either a standalone or a larger measure adopted by one house, and then there'll be a similar measure adopted by the other house. They'll seek to reconcile those. How they reconcile it, varies from legislation to legislation. Sometimes it's done by conferees, who are sort of the specialists or senior leaders of the various committees and the various counterpart committees. And other times it's done by leadership, and maybe it's bundled together into an omnibus, or maybe it's spread apart into a minibus, or maybe it's crafted into a continuing resolution. Legislation is never a straight line in Washington, but our goals, nonetheless, are very clear. The system and the process may not be super clear, but our goals are very clear, and I'll spell them out. Number one, zero out U.S. military assistance to Azerbaijan. Zero out U.S. military assistance to Azerbaijan. So at any moment, at any instance, at any opportunity in legislation that will pass the House or Senate, in which a number is attached to aid to Azerbaijan, or a prohibition is possible against aid to Azerbaijan, then we must see that put in place. So number one, zero out U.S. military assistance to Azerbaijan. That means basically taking whatever it is and bringing it to zero. That's number one. Number two, enact a statutory restriction on any U.S. aid to Azerbaijan, which is in a sense a broader effort that doesn't just say the number should be zero. It should say that the entire idea of U.S. assistance to Azerbaijan, the entire project, the entire any range of opportunity that might deliver U.S. aid to Azerbaijan is not just as I said, brought to zero, but in fact prohibited, and that's like a statutory prohibition on assistance, and that's another way of hitting the issue. Not exactly the same as the first. We need to let's say, as they say, a phased arrayed system to address this issue, to stop it in every instance. So that's number one, zero out the aid. Number two, statutorily restrict the aid. Number three, strike the provision in Section 907 that allows the president to waive Section 907. This is little more complicated. Some of you are familiar with Section 907, others are not. I'll give you the 30-second version. Passed in 1992, this law restricts aid to Azerbaijan if they're blockading or committing acts of violence and offensive uses of force against either Armenia or Artsakh. The president, after 9/11, President Bush, was given by Congress the authority to waive that law. And in fact, he did waive that law. And after he finished waiving it, President Obama waived it. And after he finished waiving it, President Trump waived it. And then after he finished waiving it, President Obama, this April, even after Azerbaijan attacked, even after Azerbaijan used our tax dollars, our military aid, to conduct offensive military operations, including war crimes against Artsakh, even President Biden waived that law. And he was wrong to do so, just as the others were. He bears a special responsibility because his waiver took place in the wake of Azerbaijan's aggression. In the wake of Azerbaijan's aggression. The others we hold accountable because their waivers contributed to Azerbaijan undertaking this attack, but Biden waived the law knowing that attack had taken place and knowing very well that U.S. capacity, U.S. assistance helped Azerbaijan prosecute that war more aggressively, frankly, more lethally. So that's number 3, is taking away from the president the authority, the right, the opportunity to waive Section 907. Number 4, legislators calling on President Biden to not waive Section 907 next year. Now that's a longer term strategy. We're looking at, certainly probably very likely next spring, the next opportunity that the Biden administration will have to look at this. If we are in a situation at that point where we have not been able to statutorily restrict aid to Azerbaijan or to remove the waiver authority, then legislators will need to step up just individually and collectively, pressuring the White House and saying, do not do this again. Do not double down on Azerbaijan. Stand up for the people of Armenia, the people of Artsakh, and restrain this government of Azerbaijan. They have received more than enough money, right? It's time for us to stop aiding and abetting, arming the violent Aliyev dictatorship. Which brings us to the 5th priority, and this is, as I said earlier, was the Valadao-Sherman Amendment on the House side, which is to appropriate assistance for Artsakh. There is some assistance right now for demining, and the Halo Trust is doing good work in Artsakh, mostly on unexploded ordnance from the war, but we need to see much more assistance, and not just for demining, for rehabilitation, humanitarian assistance, water, certainly. Azerbaijan is starving Armenia of water sources, nutrition, every manner of humanitarian assistance that you can imagine is desperately needed in Artsakh, and we need to see the Senate step up and deliver a robust aid package for the people of Artsakh. So that takes me through a pretty, like a lot of our legislative agenda, but not all of our legislative agenda. Okay, so we've also worked in recent weeks with a coalition to prevent the sale of F-16 jets to Turkey. Now, many of you know that several F-16s, very advanced fighters, not our most advanced fighters, which are now the F-35s, but very advanced American fighters. Turkey transferred several of these to Azerbaijan, and it's our understanding that they were in fact deployed against Artsakh during the war, in violation of every NATO agreement that, dozens of NATO agreements, and I'm sure in violation of a number of U.S. laws as well. That was left unchallenged and unchecked by our government, even though there were certainly laws broken. What we're working on now is to make sure that not one more F-16 reaches Turkey. Now we can't, it's beyond our means today to take back any of the F-16s they already have or those that they've transferred to Azerbaijan, but they sure as heck should not receive another F-16. And we have partnered in this effort with obviously our Greek allies who share our concerns about Turkey's aggression. Certainly we share their concerns about the security of Cyprus and Greece, but also our Kurdish friends, the Hindu American Foundation, which has been a very, very powerful partner of the Armenian National Committee. They represent hundreds of thousands, millions of Americans of Indian heritage, of the Hindu faith, and we mark with them Diwali, the blessed festival of light today, and also with the Middle East Forum. In this effort, we also saw support from the American Jewish Committee, the American Hellenic Institute, a broad range of others. It seems like a lot of Americans, a lot of legislators are lining up against the F-16 sale to Turkey. We just pushed a letter and supported a letter that Congressman Pappas, Congressman Bilirakis, Congresswoman Maloney, two co-chairs of the Greek caucus, plus Mr. Pappas, who's also Greek American. We worked with them, and we got 41 members of Congress, both parties, all across the country, to sign a letter to the State Department saying, no jets for Turkey. We sent a letter as well to the Four Horsemen, and this is going to take a moment to explain. There's a tradition here in D.C. I'm not sure it's codified, but there's a tradition here in D.C. that a major arms sale, if it's controversial, can be held up, can be blocked by the very, very senior members of committees with jurisdiction over arms sales. So that would be the Senate Armed Services Committee, the House Armed Services Committee. That's Senator Reid and Senator Inhofe. I think it's Congressman Adam Smith and Congressman Rogers on the House side. In the Senate, so then the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Menendez, and his counterpart on the Republican side, Senator Risch. And then on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Meeks and Congressman McCall. Each of those legislators, by virtue of their very important oversight authority, and also by the seniority they have and the respect that they've earned, they have the opportunity to put a hold on major arms sales. And we wrote a letter to four of those, the four Senate horsemen, Menendez, Risch, Reid, and Inhofe, making the case for we have to stop this sale. This is like pouring fuel on the fire. No one expects Turkey to use these for self-defense purposes. Everyone knows they're going to use them for offensive purposes, and at odds with American interests, certainly undermining American values. We have to stop this sale. So we're very, very active on that front. We're doing that in coalition with many friends, and I think a growing wave of legislative support. Speaking of coalitions, I want to share that our work with the Hindu American Foundation has been very productive. We're every day and every week, I feel that we find more issues that we share in common. One very, very strong issue, one very powerful issue, was the gray listing of Turkey and Azerbaijan by the global money laundering, terrorist financing watchdog. It's called the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force. They recently met, I believe they met in Paris, and they decided not to blacklist Turkey and Azerbaijan. We wanted them blacklisted, but to gray list them. They kept Pakistan on the gray list, and they added Turkey to the gray list. The International Monetary Fund estimated, this is the International Monetary Fund, this is not an ANC number, this is an IMF number. The International Monetary Fund estimates that the cost of lost GDP to Turkey is about 3%, which translates into $23 billion. That the chilling effect of this gray listing on incoming capital from global sources into Turkey will cost the Turkish government $23 billion annually. That's a hit. No one shrugs that one off. And we were very glad to see it, and we were happy that it's our understanding that this group, which is made up of a lot of major Western countries, it's represented by the U.S. Department of Treasury. It's our understanding that the U.S. Treasury Department did tilt toward these gray list sanctions, and we certainly welcome that decision. Turkey should have to face consequences for its actions. If those consequences are in the thousands, they don't care if they're in the millions, maybe not, tens of millions, maybe not, hundreds of millions, possibly billions, yes, tens of billions. Now we're talking real money. I think that was a very, very good move by our government, and we welcome it. We pushed it very aggressively alongside our Hindu allies, our Greek allies, and others. We also were proud to partner with the Hindu American Foundation on condemning anti-Hindu violence in Bangladesh. That's an outrage. We join with our Indian brothers and sisters in not simply condemning this anti-Hindu violence, but also in seeking sanctions on Pakistan, listing Pakistan as a foreign terrorist organization, and banning all U.S. military assistance to Islamabad. So that is a bit about our coalition activity. We continue to hold our own government accountable for its system-wide failings during and after Azerbaijan's aggression. Brings me no joy to level this criticism. And again, there's probably a more polite way to say these things, a more diplomatic or nuanced way to say these things. But the fact of the matter is, and I think we do owe ourselves the facts. We do owe ourselves, our community, our nation. We owe it to other Americans. We owe the truth. And the truth of the matter is that U.S. diplomacy utterly failed. It failed under Trump. It failed under Biden. It's continuing to fail until this very day. I'll list 9 points of failure, and they all need to be investigated. They all need to be overcome. The Department of State can just pretend that this never happened, or it can even worse, try to distract us from these failings, or I guess even worse than that, double down on these failings and just continue digging themselves into a deeper hole. Or they can take an honest look at what really didn't work. That was a system-wide failure. We paid, as Armenians, a huge price for this failure. We owe it to our government to get this right the next time, and that begins by addressing these 9 points of failure. The first being that they did not police Section 907. There were not sufficient safeguards in place to make sure that Section 907 was enforced. Very lax. People looked the other way. Azerbaijan took U.S. Military assistance, weaponized it against Armenians, killed innocent civilians. Number one. Number two, failure to hold the manufacturers accountable for the U.S. parts that were discovered in the Turkish Bayraktar drones. We have not yet seen an investigation. If the investigation is undertaken, if it's a serious investigation, and at the end of the day, they determine that, well, this may be morally wrong, but it didn't violate a U.S. law, okay, we can take a look at that, we can deal with that. We may not agree with it, we can appeal it, but nonetheless, that's at least a conclusion that our government can draw. More likely, they'll look into it and find multiple U.S. laws were broken. We won't know, though, unless an investigation is undertaken, and that needs to happen right away. Number three, Turkey has not been held to account for recruiting foreign mercenaries. They recruited mercenaries from Syria, jihadists, terrorist fighters against U.S. and international law. Turkey got a free pass on that. In fact, to the extent where Senator Menendez, during a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing, challenged Undersecretary Nuland and said, "What is going on with these Turkey recruiting foreign mercenaries to attack Artsakh?" And she said, "Well, I can't discuss that in public. I must discuss it in closed session, basically in secret." But that's not happened. So it was she just punted the question, played off secrecy, claiming that it was some kind of classified issue, when in fact it's public knowledge. And that's not right. That's covering for Turkey, not holding Turkey accountable. The same can be said of Turkey's use of cluster bombs and white phosphorus, other prohibited munitions. Where's the investigation? We need that investigation. The absence of an investigation is a glaring failure. Next, the prisoners of war. For most of the past year, our government would not even call them prisoners of war, because a prisoner of war is afforded protections under treaties that we've signed, that Armenia has signed, that Azerbaijan has signed. Instead, they call them detainees, which is simply a description of somebody being held somewhere, potentially under domestic law. This is not a domestic law situation. This is not anything other than prisoners who were captured in the course of a conflict, who must, according to international law, be released upon the cessation of hostilities. They must be released immediately and unconditionally, and that's not been the case. In fact, they've been held and tortured and even killed. Several more failings. Azerbaijan has continued to invade Armenian territory in at least 10 instances since the November 9th statement last year. In each instance, the U.S. government has, failed to step up, has failed to hold Azerbaijan accountable, has made, both side statements like "work out your border issues," when in fact this is demonstrably an act of aggression by Party A against Party B. When they pull that back and instead talk in generic terms about all sides working out their issues, they're just giving a free pass to aggression. I think any parent who has children knows that that particular formula is a cheap and easy formula that does not get the result you want. If the goal of the United States is to check aggression, then it must call out aggression. If its intention is just to give Ankara and Baku in this case a free pass, then they can play the both sides game. But it doesn't fool anybody. It does not fool anybody. The both sidism is a cheap, easy, pro-Azadi way out of actually stepping up and holding people responsible, of actually playing the adult in the room instead of the ally of the aggressor. A few more. In the OSCE context, we have failed to step up and assert our American leadership. Watching Aliyev lecture our U.S. representative to the Minsk group, watching him disrespect, frankly, our U.S. representative, along with the French and Russian representative, it hurt. It hurt. skin deep as an Armenian, really deep as an American, I don't think I've ever experienced, with very, very few exceptions, a foreign government, especially of some, petro-monarchy, some kind of like petty dictator, sitting on a high horse, talking down, insulting, offending the American people as represented by our diplomats abroad. That is not the America I know, and we need to do better. We need to do better. Two more, in terms of foreknowledge of Azerbaijan's attack. It's our understanding, and certainly you might conclude as well, based upon the tens of billions of dollars that we invest in our intelligence community, right? In human and technical and signals intelligence, we invest heavily in that field. So the idea that this attack was a surprise to anybody at the high reaches of the U.S. government is like laughable. The U.S. government clearly was knowledgeable about troop movements and very likely the intentions of the Azerbaijani leadership. They issued a travel warning, I think 24 hours before the attack, as if that was supposed to mean something. But the fact of the matter is they knew about the attack and they did not do anything to stop it. I guess you could argue the alternative, which is they didn't know about the attack, in which case, shame on them. Why are we spending this much money on intelligence if we can't figure out what Ilham Aliyev is up to? These things literally don't happen overnight. They require logistical moves. They require pre-positioning. They require, dealing with fuel and ammo and artillery. Every matter. These are things that are easily tracked. In fact, in America spends a considerable, and other countries too, spend a lot of money tracking. So if our government did not know that Azerbaijan was going to attack last September, then that's an embarrassment. More likely, they knew and they did nothing, and that, I guess, is even more damning. And then the last point, which I've touched on before, is the lack of humanitarian assistance to Artsakh. I've touched on it. Utter, absolute disgrace, especially when understood in the context of how much money has gone to the oil-rich government of Azerbaijan, how much military aid has gone to the oil-rich government of Azerbaijan, and how little humanitarian aid has reached the people of Artsakh that were driven from their homes by the U.S.-funded military of Azerbaijan. That takes me through that section dealing with accountability. We're also, every day that we spend, every hour that we spend, every week that we spend on advocacy, it's matched by another hour or day or week invested in our youth. We have a whole range of youth programs, and we do these things because, the work of today is essential, but the investments in tomorrow are also, absolutely needed. So our director of youth programs, of youth empowerment programs, Alex Manukian, recently went on a tour of California, spoke at many universities, many high schools, and he talked about all the programs that we have to offer young people. And we really have an array now, and we have something literally for everybody. And the goal being that we help them realize their potential, we help build them up. But as they rise, as they become successful and reach their, aspire toward great things, aspire toward and achieve great things, that they take our community and our cause with them. This is the Home Minutemen, slogan, lift yourself up, but lift others with you. And that's very much what we're involved in. I'll run through the key programs. The first is the Hovig Apo Sadejan Capital Gateway Program, which we've had for many years. It's helped hundreds and hundreds of Armenians start careers in public policy, in government, in politics, in the media. This city has literally hundreds of Armenians in these fields, precisely because we provided them with free housing at the Aramian House, which is a great property here in DuPont Circle, made possible by Sue and her late sisters, Margot and Martha Aramian, of blessed memory, a truly wonderful, wonderful family. We have this program that, so when someone graduates, a young Armenian graduates from university or graduate school, they could have a law degree or an undergraduate degree, political science or English or social studies or something like that. We bring them into DC. They have to qualify. It's a pretty selective process, and then they stay at the house. They come to the office every day. We teach them how to give a good handshake, how to conduct a good interview, how to sharpen their LinkedIn account, how to write a resume, how to draft a cover letter, every job-seeking skill that you can imagine, to front-load a year's worth of lessons learned in 3 weeks. And then in 3 months, we'll get them a job. It'll be an entry-level job, but in almost every instance, we're able to help that young person take the first steps on a DC career. And we're very, very proud of that program. And that's, again, it's named after Hovig Apple Sadejan, who was, again, a blessed memory, an AYFer from Fresno, California, who served the AYF and our community here in the U.S., our local community in Fresno, but also went to Hayastan and did great work there. It is an honor beyond words that his family, his father Apo, his sister Naidi, have entrusted us with a part of his legacy. And every young Armenian that we help, I feel, is a tribute to Hovig's legacy. It holds special meaning for us. So that's number one. Number two, we of course have our summer internship, which is named after Leo Sarkisian, who was a great pioneer. Just as Vahan Kardashian was a great leader and pioneer of the Armenian lobby, so too was Leo Sarkisian, a real moral compass for our community. We have that program every summer, usually from June through August or so, and it's a great, as they say, boot camp for the Armenian cause. Part of that is a fellowship, usually, or I think always. One of the participants in that program is a Maro Melkonian Avedissian Fellow, which is a program funded by the family of the late Maro Melkonian, her father Ara, her mother Haigo, her wonderful brother Rafi. Their families have funded a fellowship so that a young woman every summer can come here and continue the legacy of Maro's commitment to our community. She grew up, at Surplach, my parish, my local church, and I saw her grow up as a wonderful woman. She was married, ultimately, suffered a terrible illness, and we lost Maro. But her family stepped up and said, we've lost her, and she's no longer with us day to day, but her spirit will stay with us forever. Every summer, there's going to be a young woman who carries her legacy forward into the next generation, and we're really, really proud of that program. We're also going to announce soon, we don't have dates ready to announce just yet, but next spring, we're going to hold Rising Leaders programs, which is just a 3-day program to introduce young people, usually early in their college career, to Washington, D.C. And they spend 3 days on Capitol Hill, at various universities, here at the ANC office, at the Aram House, and we introduce them to everything about Washington, everything about our advocacy, but also about career opportunities here in the nation's capital. Now, one of the days is devoted fully to congressional visits and Capitol Hill meetings, and that is named after the wonderful, the angel of Washington, Lucien Kuchakjian. When I first arrived here, she adopted me as a third son. Her two sons are, Michael and Ara, each of whom are just remarkable fathers, remarkable community leaders. The two brothers and Sarkis, Lucien's husband, have helped us to fund the Capitol Hill Day. And that means that we can have these young people spend a day on the Hill. We can have events for them on the Capitol. We can meet and greet Armenians who work for Congress, meet with legislators, talk about career opportunities, but also advance issues that mean a lot to us. And that's made possible by the Kuchakjian family. And for that, we're just super, super grateful. And it's really, that is a beautiful thing about our community, the multi-generational nature of our community, where, somebody that I knew as a young person who contributed so much throughout her life, was active in ANC Maryland, worked with legislators who are still active to this very day. And with her passing, her family stepped up and said, well, that will not end with her passing. We will in fact continue that legacy and make it a permanent fixture of the ANCA in Washington, D.C. Really, really grateful to the Kuchakjian family. Finally, we have a summer academy, which is a new program. We had it for the first time this past summer, which is for high school kids. So no college kids, just high school kids. You could have finished your last year of high school, but not start college yet. Let's say junior, senior, or recent grad, high school. Come to DC for a 1-week program where we introduce you again to Washington, DC. Some socializing, a little bit of sightseeing, but a heavy dose of education and engagement on the work of the Armenian community, the work of the Armenian National Committee in Washington, D.C. Again, that program supported by a wonderful Armenian family, the family of Haratun and Elizabeth Kasparian, the Avjayan family. Adru and Arsho is their daughter. They have stepped up, and their son, in turn, Nareg. So the Kasparians, in their legacy for Hartrid and Elizabeth, we have established the Summer Academy. And again, it really means a lot to me when the kids come in and, you know, we talk to them and get them all oriented and explain all the programs and stuff, and then say, you know, we're able to do this because of what the Kasparians did. We're able to do this because of what the Alchayans did, right? And we will give you every opportunity to succeed. But we do hope that when you do succeed, you will sort of pay it back, that you will, just as you were given a hand up, right, that you'll put your hand out and bring up the next generation. And I think we've seen that already, and I think it's just growing and growing. I think it's taking on momentum of its own, and I think that culture of the Pro-Artsakh culture is really taking root here in Washington through each of these programs: the Gateway Program, the internship, the Summer Academy, the Rising Leaders, all the fellowships and internships that we have. These all are really, really great ways to prime the pump of Armenian engagement in our nation's capital. Of course, on top of that, we just have an open door to college students who want to do semester internships. This particular semester, we have a gap year student, Alec Boyajian, who I know because he's active in the AYF and in the same chapter that I grew up in New Jersey, the New Jersey Arson AYF chapter. He's starting the University of Chicago next fall, but during this semester, he's volunteering here at the ANCA, doing remarkable work, learning. Frankly, he's teaching us a lot. He's going to go off to school, I think, super well prepared to pursue his studies, and those opportunities exist as well. So please do stay in touch with us on all of these youth programs. If you're interested, great. If somebody you know is interested, you know, send them over, you know, share their name. If you have a child or a grandchild who you think might benefit from these programs, they're really, really powerful. I've not seen anyone go through these programs and not feel inspired and informed and engaged and wanting to make a difference. And that's, I think, a beautiful thing. When we can, when the best of who we are can help bring out the best of who these young people are. So really excited about that. And I will wrap that up by saying, again, advocacy is like center stage. We are an advocacy organization, but we match every hour of advocacy with another hour of empowerment and making sure that the work that we do today continues and grows and is built upon for years and, frankly, for generations to come. So with all that said, I'm going to thank you for your patience. If you sat through this entire video, you know, high marks, gold star, much, much appreciated. I will be in touch and look forward to staying engaged with you. Please follow us on our website, anca.org, on our Facebook page, our Twitter account, LinkedIn, all the rest. If you're not a rapid responder, become a rapid responder by visiting anca.org/rapid. It's a super easy way to stay engaged, to always be on time and on target with your advocacy. Thanks so very much.